Welcome to Opposition Territory here at the Philadelphia Sports Table Podcast Show, the longest-running weekly Philly sports podcast show in the world. 13 years strong, yes, as you have heard, longtime listeners, and if you're new to the show, 13 years this month that we are celebrating and recognizing the Philadelphia Sports Table Podcast Show. And on this Opposition Territory pod this week, we're going to be getting into the Miami Marlins. It's been some time since we have focused on this particular team within the NL East. As of us recording this, they are second in the NL East. They are completely killing the Philadelphia Phillies in terms of the divisional standings at this point. But joining us, we got a great guest. We've had him on before. Love talking to him when it comes to Major League Baseball and specifically the Miami Marlins. From Fish on First, great SB Nation site, we have got our good friend Ely Sussman. My friend, thank you so much for taking the time to join us here. Appreciate it.
Yeah, not uncharted, but unfamiliar situation with the Phillies looking up at the Marlins in the standings. There haven't been too many occasions to say that in recent years.
Absolutely. Look, as I mentioned, Marlins currently in second place in the NL East as of us recording this here on April 21st. And I really want to first just talk about how this team has gotten here. And I know it may sound like a general topic to get us started, but for some context with our listeners who may not necessarily be as in tune with the Marlins, certainly as you are and others that follow this team, let's get into the offseason. The offseason, how it transpired, what moves transpired, how the team really handled itself throughout the course of the offseason that inevitably led to really where we are today in April on the field with this Marlins team that is doing some pretty good stuff, especially from a consistency standpoint. So can you take us through the offseason, give us some context as to how we ended up getting here today?
Backing up even a little further quickly, the Marlins played really great baseball from mid-June of last year all the way through the end of the season. That may be a reason why they erred on the side of a lot of continuity over the offseason. Some moves on the margins early on. They kind of swapped out their primary first baseman, Eric Wagman. They got rid of him and they replaced him with Christopher Morel as a free agent signing. They did a similar thing in the outfield. Dane Myers was kind of their fourth, fifth outfielder for a lot of last year. They swapped him out and brought in Esteury Ruiz. The first big domino to fall was when they signed Pete Fairbanks. And that was, there were a lot of rumors leading up to it that they actually were going to make a big investment in a reliever. And that's unusual for this franchise. He is the highest paid single season reliever in franchise history, getting $13 million this year. He had a connection, pre-existing relationship with the Marlins president of baseball operations, Pete Fairbanks, because both of them were with the Rays for a number of years. And it's just an unusual way to allocate resources when this team, they had the lowest payroll in baseball last year, and they're going to finish in that same territory again this year. They ended up, diverting a lot of their resources to a very effective and established reliever, but one that even if everything goes well, he's only going to give you a certain amount of innings over the course of a season. So that was an interesting move. And then it was just a few weeks later that they traded away Edward Cabrera, coming off his best, most durable year in the big leagues, traded him to the Cubs for a prospect package that was headlined by Owen Casey. I wouldn't say that was a surprise at all, that this was an opportunity to sell high on him after a half decade of a lot of frustration between his injuries and his lack of control. The most surprising move was just within a few days of that trade, making another starting pitching trade, trading away Ryan Weathers to the Yankees. That's one that caught people off guard. I would say that was the most unpopular move as well, myself included, being not feeling like that was the optimal time to deal him. That in a vacuum, I think that his future was even brighter than Cabrera's. And as we're talking right now, both of them are off to pretty good starts with their new teams. They traded him to the Yankees. They got 4 prospects in return. None that really capture your imagination. So it was quantity over quality return to send him to the Yankees. And then they make a couple signings at the end of the offseason to add more pitching depth, but just minimal commitments. Bring in John King, a lefty reliever, on a 1-year deal, and Chris Paddock at the very end of the offseason to be the quintessential number 5 starter. So aside from that, it was a lot of continuity, especially on the position player side. A lot of the same faces, very young team, so many rookies and second-year players last year that are now given an opportunity to take another step forward.
And what's interesting about the offseason too, and you mentioned it a little bit there, was a certain amount of investment in the team. We know what the payroll is. We know how the Marlins over the years have paid their players, and there's that there's that aura of, okay, they're not going to pay their players. What's going to happen with the Marlins 10 years from now? Are they ever going to sniff a championship? Are they going to sniff the playoffs because of the lack of investment? And I say to myself, wow, second in the division right now.
Mm-hmm.
There may be a plan of action here where they don't spend a ton of money, but they're understanding how certain key investments are going to help for the future. Am I correct in that assessment there?
Yeah, that's a fair one, all things considered. That
Okay.
Yeah, I think
All
you're
right.
right there.
Right direction. Okay, very good. Well, look, I mean, I'm going to get into the starting pitching here on this team. Max Meyer, I mean, he's certainly been one of the most consistent starting pitchers on the team and in the rotation here. I'm wondering, how have you seen the starting pitching helping or hurting this Marlins team over the first month of the season? Because, I mean, the bullpen we're going to get to in a bit, but from a starting pitching standpoint here, Eli, again, with Max Meyer and what he's been doing to provide that consistency, how has it translated over to the rest of the starting rotation here, in your opinion, from what you've seen?
It was a question mark coming into this year because of those aforementioned trades, trading out some depth. They've already had Max Meyer from the previous year, but he was coming off. He'd missed so much of 2025 due to injury that he was a big wild card. And so it looks like a question mark heading into the start of this season. It started off on a great note just because Sandy Alcantara, his first few starts of the season, was as good as anybody in baseball. He may have allowed 1 or 2 total runs, including he threw his first shutout. Well, the first shutout of any pitcher in Major League Baseball early in the year to cap things off. So it got started out on a pretty good note. And I think overall they're in a decent place with that, more so because they've been fortunate from a health standpoint. I mean, it's not for nothing that they've now made it 4 or 5 turns through the rotation, 5 turns, I guess, without any sort of interruption or injury.
Yeah.
You look around the league and it's just pretty easy for something to go awry there, even dating back to spring training. So they've had the guys that they want available, and then they like the depth that they have behind him. You did bring up Max Meyer, and he had gotten off to a good start last year. Then he started dealing with a hip injury right around this time in late April of 2025, and was never right after that. So to this point, he looks like a more complete pitcher than he's been in the past, but he is at best, if things go well for him, he's a solid number 3 starter. You're putting a lot of pressure on Sandy Alcantara and on Yuri Perez, who has a very close relationship to Sandy and much of the same upside, but has missed a lot of time due to injury himself. And he has had some pretty extreme home road splits throughout his entire career that have translated it right into this year. It's been more of the same trend with that, where he's looked great in a couple home starts, including his most recent one, but on the road, he got embarrassed pretty badly against the Yankees at Yankee Stadium, where he walked 6 guys and then hit another couple batters in that aspect. So yeah, overall, there have been very few truly terrible outings from this team. The floor has been pretty high with them, and then the ceiling is high because of Sandy, because sometimes Sandy can just give the rest of the pitching staff the whole day off and go the distance, which is a pretty big rarity in this day and age.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Look, and in terms of the pitching, want to get your thoughts on the bullpen here, and specifically how the Marlins have built their bullpen, which I think has been pretty interesting. I mean, you mentioned Pete Fairbanks. I mean, they seem to have built this bullpen around him. Of course, when you look at the bullpen today, Eli, how has the consistency and at times inconsistency played into how this team has performed, how they've been playing over the past several weeks here? What are your thoughts here?
If you look at Pete Fairbanks' numbers right now, you might be thinking that the Marlins have some buyer's remorse already just because his ERA is floating around 8. But he's had an unusual ride in a short sample already, because he went on the paternity list barely a week into the year, and the Marlins used him as an opener for that game. So yeah, the deal is he has a baby coming. They're in New York. He has to get down to Florida, and the game is in a rain delay. So instead of waiting until like the 8th or 9th inning of the game to use him, they use him in the very first inning so that he could catch a flight before the rest of the team to go home to get to his kid. And it did not go well for him in the game. I mean, everything went very well in the delivery rooms and on his fraternity leave. So
most important.
Most important.
Yeah.
That did leave some damage on his overall numbers. And then he didn't pitch again until a week and a half later, which got plenty of scrutiny that even once he came back from they gave him his time to be with his kid. But even
Yeah.
when he came back, the Marlins weren't playing in any classic save situations for a while. And then he got really rusty. And his first game back after that was in a pretty important situation. And he blew a 2-run lead against Atlanta in what was one of the more frustrating losses of the year for this team. So between those two outings, they really inflated his numbers. Outside of that, he's looked great, and that's been a
Yeah.
key piece of that. So outside of that, there are a couple under the radar guys that are exciting. In fact, I should bring up, because this is a Philadelphia show, I should bring up Tyler Phillips, who was
Yes.
with the Phillies organization. The Marlins acquired him right before the start of 2025 as a glorified waiver claim. It was for cash considerations that they acquired him. And he was great, especially the second half of last year. And he's continued to be great this year. Only allowed 1 earned run to this point in the season. It's a sub-1 ERA for this team. And he's a really versatile piece.
Not bad. Yeah.
He can cover multiple innings when you need him. He can be a setup guy when you need him. And then last year, he even closed in some situations. He has the perfect demeanor for that. He's a really fun personality, and he's become a big part of this organization already. So that's been a nice surprise that has continued into this year.
Well, I'm glad you have him. Great. No, I'm just kidding.
A lot of teams will love him at this point, I imagine.
Yes.
So, yeah, the one kind of concern that's still lingering from last year is that last year the Marlins were very deficient on left-handed pitching, especially left-handed relievers. And this year, I mentioned they went out to sign John King in free agency, and he's been great, but they were also hoping to get some other lefty in the bullpen in some role. And they've been banking on Andrew Nardi to make somewhat of a career comeback. And Phillies fans may remember Andrew Nardi just because he was the one in the 23 wild card series that he gave up a grand slam to Bryson Stott that essentially ended that series.
Yep.
And it was a pretty cool moment from a neutral observer just to see the crowd absolutely erupt at Citizens Bank Park for that in 2023. He hasn't been the same guy since then due to a back injury and just some other inconsistency. And he's been hit or miss so far this year as well. Like, to this point, I don't know exactly what they're going to get out of him. That's going to continue to be a weakness for this team, is how they deal with left-handed bats late in the game if they're so reliant on just John King and everybody else is a question mark.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to watch for sure where the pitching goes, starting pitching and bullpen for this Marlins team. And again, folks, we're talking to our good friend Ely Sussman from Fish on First, fishonfirst.com. Check out all their content. And where can folks find you on the interwebs out there if they want to connect with you, Ely?
Well, I mean, as the boss over there, I'm kind of behind the keyboards on all the main Fish on First accounts, anywhere you get it. But me personally, if you want to find my tweets as well, Real Ely at ELY. You can find that account on Twitter as well for some of my personal observations, my own individual articles too. But yeah, and wherever you find FOF covering the Marlins on essentially any platform, including our podcast channel, I'm behind that, for better or worse. I'm
all right.
calling the shots over there.
Very good. Very good. All right, folks, we're going to take a break. And when we get back, we've got more Marlins talk coming your way. All right, let's keep talking about this Marlins team. And again, currently second in the NL East. The Phillies are certainly looking up to the Marlins at this particular point as we're recording this, again, April 21st, 2026. So something I like to do with some guests every now and again, haven't done it in a little while here, Ely, is having player categories here. So I'm wondering which players on the Marlins are going to fit the following categories that we're going to go through. Hoping you can give me a name and a brief explanation as to why you picked that certain player. Let's start with the comeback kid. Here in April, who has been the comeback kid on the Miami Marlins team thus far?
At first glance, my mind goes to Sandy, just because last year was the worst year of his career. But the thing is, he kind of turned this comeback. This comeback started in the middle of 2025. That's kind of when he started flipping back into the old version of himself and started giving the team length and consistent quality again and stepping up as the leader of the rotation. So I think the more appropriate pick here would be Connor Norby. At this time, a year ago, Norby was considered one of the building blocks of this franchise entering 2025.
Yeah.
They thought he was a really intriguing combination of just hitting to all fields and also having some surprising pop. He could be their franchise third baseman potentially. And last year went really badly for him on all fronts, including on the injury front. He had 3 separate injuries, so he only played about half the games in 2025. He had said coming into the year that he wanted to hit 30 home runs, and he ended up with 7 or 8 total.
Yeah.
Not only because of the injuries, but because when he was healthy, he wasn't hitting left-handed pitching at all, and he wasn't hitting for power in general. Just really bad plate approach. So yeah, he had a lot to prove this year, and so far he's been much better, and he's been doing it as a first baseman too. So that's been an interesting wrinkle where it's another position that's totally new to him, but he has been basically an everyday player for them to this point in the season. So it's closer to what they were hoping for originally from him.
Marlins fans have to love it. They absolutely have to love what they're seeing there for sure. What about the breakout guy this year? So far as we're in April, who is that breakout guy and why?
It would be Liam Hicks from this team,
Okay.
who was a Rule 5 draft pick the previous year, and he looked like he had all the makings of this very reliable backup catcher. That's kind of what he was, a good backup catcher, and one that really was great situationally, had some carrying tools that made you feel like he made the team better. But
Yeah.
he has taken that to the next level. As we're speaking right now, he's like tied for the major league lead in RBIs, the entire big leagues to this point in the season. And he has been splitting time. He's not their backup catcher now, he's kind of sharing the job with Augustin Ramirez, and he continues to be a great contact hitter. The main difference is that he's just hitting the ball harder than he did last year. Like, in no uncertain terms, he was just too weak last year.
Yeah.
He only had 5 total home runs, and he's coming close to match that already in a small sample this year. He's in the NL batting title contention very early on. And so, yeah, I would call that a breakout by any measure for him so far.
All right. Very good. Next category is the rising star on the team. Who gets that designation from you, Eli, and why?
I'd still go with Yuri Perez in that category, even though he's
Okay.
had that uneven start. He's the one I had circled coming into the year. He just has all the makings of being a frontline starter, as somebody that throws. His fastball sits at 99 miles per hour, and it has this ride to it that when he's on, you just cannot even make contact with him. He can be so dominant in little spurts, and he has deep pitch mix as well. Like, he's just a really complete pitcher, and generally speaking, he attacks the zone really well despite being 6'8", which can be really difficult to control your stuff from that size. But yeah, he is the one that they're leaning on, especially this year. They're kind of hoping he takes the lead. He's only 23 years old. Sometimes the production comes later on, but whether it's going to come this year or next year or the following year, he's still going to be so young. He's eventually going to be a star as long as he stays healthy.
All right, very good. And the final category is the MVP of the team thus far. Who do you give that to?
Well, it lines up well that I could give you another unique name that's aside from the other ones. This one would have to be Otto Lopez to this point. If you want to just look at the overall value that he's providing, he's been one of the most valuable players in the entire league for any team to this point. He's just their everyday shortstop now. Just like Liam Hicks, he's hitting 330 something to this point in the season.
It's crazy.
But he's also hitting for more power than he did before. And he's also a good base runner. And he's also a really solid defensive shortstop as well. He's just one of those great all-around players that is another former waiver claim. They got him for nothing from the Giants, and they got him for nothing from the Blue Jays a couple of years prior to that. So he's been just an amazing organizational development story to turn that into an everyday caliber player. So, yeah, he's an MVP so far. And I think he's going to be much more broadly recognized as long as he keeps some of this up for the whole season.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I'm trying to take off my Phillies homer hat here because I do think it's really interesting to see where the Marlins are going to go this season. Yes, there's only been about a month of baseball that has been played. We got a lot more baseball to play this season, but with that being said, this Marlins team is young and it's very developmental in certain ways. Most of the roster, I believe, is under 27 years old. My gosh, they are so young. So I'm wondering, Eli, is this more of a rebuild team, or are the Marlins really quietly competing at this point here in 2026? So to close us out here, what are your thoughts here?
Back in the day, not that long ago, it used to be easier to like categorize teams in one bucket or the other, right? And
Yeah.
what I'd mainly credit this to the Tampa Bay Rays, where they made it more normal to go back and forth between those, to almost straddle that line between rebuilding, like looking at the long term and trying to maximize the present, and constantly being 1 foot in, 1 foot out. But if you're a good enough organization, then you can continue to be competitive even while you're building up assets for the future. And whether you like it or not, the Marlins have a lot of that DNA in them now because of Peter Bendix coming from the Rays organization. And I feel like last year for sure, they were still in that rebuild. They kind of overachieved, but they were certainly looking more towards long term. And now they're kind of squarely in both camps. I would say that it leans more towards competing right now.
Okay.
If you look at this team, mainly because a lot of their top prospects are even the ones that haven't debuted yet. All of them are in the upper levels of the minors, and they're knocking on the door. The Marlins are going to get reinforcements when inevitably injuries come up. They have studs at AAA that are ready to debut, and meaning that there's not much for the Marlins to gain by trading away any of their other current veterans, because the guys that they are looking to help in, now and in the future are already in the organization. Those guys have already been acquired from the previous trades in 2024 and 2025, which means that they just don't have that incentive. There's not really as much temptation to make classic rebuilding moves if they have those guys already in tow and ready to contribute. So, I mean, the question is whether they're good enough to actually compete right now with what they got. And they might be. I mean, I'll say again that at this moment, they're in a pretty good spot, pretty lucky spot in terms of being healthy. I'm curious exactly. They're going to be relying on some of those prospects a lot if they lose a couple bodies over the course of the season, whereas some other organizations that invest more on their overall roster have better depth, or at least more proven depth at that time. So what I'll say is that at this moment last year, the Marlins had the exact same record they have right now. We're speaking as they're 11-12. And at this moment last year, they cratered. That is when they slowly fell off the map. They were terrible for like the next month and a half after that. And nobody heard from them until like June. And then all of a sudden they resurfaced in June and they were decent again, but it was too little too late. They just dug themselves a really deep hole. So the difference this year is that I feel pretty confident that crater isn't coming. This is a team that is not going to slump over significant periods of time because it's just more well-balanced team than it was a year ago. Offensively, they've kind of proven that some of the things they did late last year wasn't a fluke. And then pitching wise, I really like what they have right now, and especially what they have, knocking on the door. I feel pretty good about the depth in that area as well. So they're closer to competing, but I think, put it this way, that it would be a very pleasant surprise if by the end of the year, if they're still in second place in this division, that would be a successful season by their standards.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I would agree. I think this is a team that is really looking to compete now. They certainly are here in April for sure in the NL East and throughout Major League Baseball. Again, folks, he is Ely Sussman from Fish on First, fishonfirst.com. Great SB Nation site. And my friend, it was great having you on. Absolutely love our discussions. And I'm hoping you can come back and join us at some point down the road. I'd love to have you back on, talk more baseball, talk more Marlins. I'd love to do it, man.
I'll be here for you. Thanks again, Jeff.